I consolidated. Obviously, the blue stuff for the rosters is like confirmed, so we probably won't have to talk about them.
Yeah.
Uh, Miami, we think we know what the 4-man roster is, but obviously they haven't like confirmed the other guys outside of Trakes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then after today, Falcons will be fully confirmed. So that still leaves 1, 2, and Toronto. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams. 6.5 if you get Miami unconfirmed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw people talk about the omit thing.
Yep.
I feel vindicated, even though obviously it didn't happen, but people are on my side. You ready to get started?
Let's
Yeah.
testing Twitch 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Testing Twitch 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Oh yeah, you sound good. YouTube's really behind for me. Hold on.
All right.
Yeah, you're good on YouTube too.
All right. Hello and welcome to episode 194 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we actually got some RosterMania confirmations. We got some reports. We got a little bit of everything, including some seemingly pretty big news with Black Ops 7 and maybe no skill-based matchmaking. We'll see, and we'll talk about it. Before we get to any of that, how you doing, Bink?
Yeah, doing all right. Been just exactly 2 weeks now. Our last show was October 1st, so haven't had a ton of stuff go on. Obviously, there was the Black Ops 7 beta, but in terms of CDL roster stuff and all that, good stuff there. We've had a couple reports, but still, like I was just saying to you right before we started, still basically half the league with unconfirmed rosters, and the game is supposed to be dropping in a month. So, interesting situation, but we do have at least some reports on some of these rosters we haven't heard much from yet, so we'll be able to dive into that.
Yeah, I want to start at I want to start here because we've been talking about Cloud9 a lot this offseason, just about we didn't really know anything about what they were actually going to do, and that seemed to be very concerning if you were a C9 fan. This past week, though, on October 10th, there were reports that, I guess, further reports after some initial ones that C9 would be, Vancouver, not C9, Vancouver would be looking, or why is the breaking point? Is Atura the Vancouver coach? Oh, I got him
Yes.
so confused with the what's the new guy at C9?
Arian.
Yeah, I literally just thought the same exact person. But excuse me. So I want to talk real quick about Vancouver, not C9. Vancouver has Atura, and he is bringing in this, part of the omit roster that we were talking about, and that we suggested should, be a full team coming into the CDL after being very, very competitive in challengers. That obviously is not the case. A report by Ronnie Intel of Breaking Point, he said that Vancouver is looking at bringing in Legend, who is a Halo pro, Gwen, obviously coming from, I guess, most recently Cloud9, but really the Carolina Royal Ravens, Abe, who was a EWC player for Toronto, and then Lunars, who had his rookie year with the LAG Gorilla Mates or whatever they're called. So this is a very, very interesting roster. What's your kind of initial reaction? Because I think there's been a little bit of criticism in just the sense that it hasn't seemingly, like this is a really young roster, I should say. Like, I don't know who is the oldest on this team. Like, Lunars is like, what, 20? Abe is around that age. Gwen is probably around that age, and I don't know much about Legend, but like this is a super young team, and I guess just initial reactions to Vancouver's reported roster.
Yeah, I think right off the bat there, I guess for oldest player, I mean, it's undoubted that the longest tenured veteran on the team is Gwen, just based on experience in the CDL, and even if Legend is somehow like older than him in age, he would be
Yeah.
playing in his rookie year. But in terms of criticism, it does seem like what I've seen so far, the criticism is levied towards Legend, and I find that to be the weirdest part of this situation. I feel like it's like in the past and in other years and other teams, we've sat here and said like, oh, te- team A isn't giving this rookie player in challengers an opportunity, and now we have a situation here where Vancouver is reportedly giving Legend the opportunity to switch from Halo to COD, and people are up in arms about that. So it's like it's a classic COD case of you can't please anybody no matter what you do. Um, so I don't agree with that criticism. And again, like you said, I don't know much about Legend and his play style or anything like that, how he would do in Call of Duty, but we've obviously it seems like maybe a lot of the newer CDL fans might not know the roots of some of these guys like Crim6 and Formal and even Hook to an extent. Shotzi, like players have successfully enabled. A lot of players have come over to Call of Duty from Halo and had successful, if not legendary, careers. And it's unfair to put that on Legend without even seeing him in action, but at the very least we can say like it's not like some outlandish thing to be like, oh, this Halo kid's gonna come over to COD and we have no precedence or anything to compare it to. Like it's been done before and it could happen again. So I'm excited to see what Legend can do, and I'm really glad Vancouver is giving him an opportunity to do it. Um, you could make the argument that you want to see him maybe play in challengers or some online Call of Duty action first before just giving him like a starting CDL spot, and I think that's a valid argument. But at the same time, if you think if you're in Vancouver's situation where you just had a pretty uh, successful season in terms of making it to the finals but not winning championships, like the next step in that, if you're not going to be winning championships, you want to be in a position to sort of set yourself up for the future and whatnot. If you think Legend has a chance to be a part of the organization long term going forward and being a piece to build around, like giving him a shot is if that's what they decide to do, I got no problem with it. So I think it's will be pressure on him to produce, and it will be interesting to see how it works out. But I am excited to see Legend on this team right away if it does come to fruition. Um, I can't say it's the most interesting part because I do think just the Legend is the the noteworthy piece here. But Lunars definitely jumps out to me. We've talked about him numerous times over the last year since he made his debut last season with the Gentlemates, and I definitely thought he would be back in challengers to start this season again, trying to like prove himself and show that he's capable of being a CDL pro. But reportedly getting a chance like this, I think that's great for him, and it gives him a clean slate and another opportunity to showcase his abilities. Um, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I said it when we were like going over the rosters from last year and what we thought teams would do, whatever episode that would be now. I was like, yeah, I think Lunars is going to be on the outside looking in, and most likely have to work his way back up again from challengers. But he gets a shot here, with some other guys, even Abe and obviously Legend trying to prove what they can do, and then you got Gwen who we know what he can do statistically and in online play, but can he take that to the next level and you know share what he's learned over these past couple seasons with some other up and coming talents? Like I think this team it's an interesting team. It's not a team that I expect to compete for championships right away on day one, but I like the potential that some of these guys have, and I'm excited to see how it works out.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest thing is that they just didn't go for the old CDL pros and the guys that had been around a long time and really hadn't had any success, but they just felt like okay, like it's easier, it's more comfortable to go to these guys that have had multiple chances. With each of these players, they're coming off of their first CDL team, or Gwyn technically his second, but really like he was on C9 for like a month, and was on Carolina for 2 years before that. Um, Legends obviously coming in. Like I just think taking a swing, taking the risk is worth it for Vancouver. If they weren't able to keep their roster from this past season, which in a perfect world they would have been able to keep them and they would have been able to try to compete with that roster going into the 2026 season. But when Atlanta FaZe and all these other organizations are kind of targeting those players, it just makes it incredibly difficult to retain them all. But this is, if you can't be if you can't get a proven competitive roster together, I think this is probably the second best thing. You're experimenting, you're seeing what there is with Legend. He's 22 years old, according to I think it was the Liquipedia page. Um, he's on Optic Halo. They play Halo Worlds in like a week and a half, 2 weeks, and so after that, I guess then that's when he'll really start to focus on COD, because I believe there will be about a year off for all of the Halo pros, which I mean that's kind of an underrated thing that maybe the Halo guys aren't really thinking about too much right now, but we could see more of them jump over after Worlds ends and Black Ops 7 comes around and they start playing it. But the fact that he got a spot on a CDL team right away is really, really interesting. That is a sign of immense faith from Vancouver, a sign of faith from Atura, I'm sure. Um, we'll see how it goes. There's no way to even remotely predict it accurately. We have no information. Like even if he's this incredible Halo player, which he is, that means absolutely nothing in the context of this team, because we've never seen these players play together. Like I don't think any combination of these players has ever been on a team with each other. So to that extent, like it's just kind of a crapshoot. It's a worthy crapshoot, and I very much applaud Vancouver for making this move. We'll see how it pays off. But they made a big move with the Neptune signing
Yeah.
last season during the middle of the year. We both thought like that was not going to be any kind of game changer, and they ended up being the second best team in the world by the end of the year. So, we don't know anything basically. Um,
I don't want to gloss over. I know we mentioned it very briefly too at the start, but just Atura, as far as I remember, this is his first CDL coaching opportunity since the Florida Mutineer days when
believe so, yeah.
he was a part of that. It would have been the inaugural season, which also included Frosty on that team, making the transition from Halo to COD. So, um, it's interesting that there's that dynamic there of the pairing of Artura and Legend potentially, and it's just interesting in general that Artura is getting another opportunity. Obviously, um, that initial Florida Mutineers team had multiple iterations, but it was F3 Pharaoh, Skies, Awakening, Frosty, and Havoc, and at multiple there was like Mox was on it. I think maybe Pristini was a different year and I'm mixing it. I don't know, but they won a couple of the online events once COVID hit. So Artura had some success and then was out of the CDL for a couple years. I think he was a part of that. Um, the Arcides team, not at EWC last year, but so it would have been EWC 2024. I think Arturo was the coach of that squad, so he's been around, but not exactly in the CDL. So if this is if this report comes to fruition, it will be cool to see him back in the CDL and see what he's able to do with a second chance. I know we talk a lot about players getting a second chance, but here's a coach potentially getting a second opportunity. So another tidbit there.
Yeah, he was Florida's coach for 2 years, the first 2 years of the CDL, and he also coached Neptune. Neptune came from Halo before he arrived in COD, so there is, I guess he has some kind of track record with that type of player. It might not match up entirely with Legend,
Yeah.
but it's impossible to tell at this point. But yeah, this past season, he was P7's head coach at the end of the year at EWC, which is Prolute, Standy, Brack, and Yuli, all former CDL players. Major Maniac was a part of that coaching staff. At Challengers Finals, he was Omit Brooklyn's coach, same roster and everything. So, I'm really excited for this team. I'm again, like, I can't express how happy I am that it's not just a retread roster that we don't have any kind of intrigue about. Like, we just know exactly how they're going to play and what's going to happen to them by the second major in the season. We don't know anything about this.
On that note, if you're done here, I think that's a good segue to the C9 report.
Yeah, so the C9, like we said with Omit, they they were this incredible challengers team, and there were former CDL players. I don't want to say like this was just an all challengers, like all first time pros or whatever, but they had proven themselves as a team, as a full 4-man roster, and we had said multiple times, I believe, over the past few months, basically since the CDL season ended, that it would make a lot of sense for whatever team. It doesn't really matter. Like, but typically you would think of C9, Minnesota, Vancouver, LAG, these rosters that we weren't entirely sure if they were going to spend the money to kind of attract free agents, big name free agents to come to their team. It would make a lot of sense for those teams to target Omit as a foursome, as, hey, like, let's just bring your whole operation from there to here and let's see if it works out. Like, maybe we could just build the chemistry, year over year, month after month, and you guys can have success at the challengers level and at the CDL level. C9 saw that and it was like, nah, we're good. And it reportedly, or I guess not reportedly, more like allegedly, according to Mamba, every CDL team was kind of like that. Every team was like, yeah, we don't really want this whole team. We want part of this team. We don't want all 4 of you guys. And so what that ended up being is C9 signing, reportedly, according to Ronnie Intel, the roster of Beans, Afro, Mac, and Vivid, with Arian as their head coach. Obviously, we talked about that, I believe, on the last episode. And then Marky B as an assistant coach, which is very interesting, I think. That being said, like, this roster is very uninspiring. One of the most uninspired rosters in a while in the CDL that I can remember, because like, Afro performed very, very well in challengers this year, and I think this was more of a comeback year for him, and I think that's really encouraging, and I love to see guys get another chance if they're able to do something. But I believe that if Afro doesn't deliver on this chance, it is the last chance. And Vivid, there's just like no doubt about it in my mind that if he doesn't deliver in this chance, it's the last chance. Mac, he might get one more. Beans, this also might be his last chance. That's a super scary position to have in your roster. And they had the opportunity to go and bring in guys like Mamba and Craze as a part of that Omit roster. They decided not to. And now they put together this team. And I'm not really convinced that this is going to last past, the major 2 qualifiers. What do you think about this reported C9 roster: Beans, Afro, Mac, and Vivid?
Well, I'll pump the brake on the roster changes thing, and we'll circle back to that. But um, you kind of the 2 things that really jumped out to me for this report are Afro and Marky B. I'm really happy Afro is reportedly getting another opportunity in the CDL. It felt like um, that was a major talking point last year throughout his success in challengers, and then there was even that report of him getting a shot to play with Carolina for EWC this year, and then that fell through. So I'm happy for him that he's seemingly reportedly getting another opportunity in the CDL, especially with all the success he's had in challengers. He was always, touted as, a next up very high skill player, and uh, it just he was on multiple iterations of London teams that didn't really work out, and then he was on Minnesota, I believe, and that roster didn't really work out either. So, um, yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see if he's able to make the most of this opportunity. In turn, oh, am I here?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, I was the YouTube screen went black for me. Um, so yeah, so happy for Afro reportedly getting a shot, and then Marky B. I think that's a good just business decision for the organization, especially with all of the uh, I don't think there's necessarily been a ton of criticism or anything around Arian being named head coach, but
No.
we brought it up last time, like when there was the LAG situation with VOs or whatever a couple years ago, where like they gave this guy a chance and people like Enable were questioning him and stuff. You kind of avoid that in this situation when you have someone like Marky B joining the coaching staff. It's like, okay, you got somebody uh, who's been established in the COD scene for a long time that's gonna be involved in this team. So I think that's just a really smart move. But yeah, outside of that, like I agree with your assessment that this is just that for the Vancouver team that I am really excited to watch play. This team, I'm just not at all excited. I think I definitely sung Vivid and Max praises over the years. Vivid probably more so just because I've always appreciated his play style and willingness to do the dirty work and his ability in S&D. And even last season, we meant like Carolina was just seemingly went off the rails after they decided to make a roster move to replace him. So he definitely showed his worth, and then building his way back up with that Omit roster. I just think, it's nothing against Vivid and Mac, but a lot of people who wanted to see that Omit roster, it was most likely probably more so they wanted to see Mamba and Craze get an opportunity
Yeah.
than Vivid and Mac. And I do think it would have been interesting to just see that foursome get an opportunity to work together, because obviously it worked in a small sample size last year, but now you're basically just taking the vets from that squad and plugging them inside a roster without that like exciting up and coming talent. And that's nothing against Afro and Beans, but to an extent, we kind of know what to expect from Afro and Beans, and Mamba and Grace. We just don't like they are the unknown entities, and they could be superstar potential, or they could be nothing. But it's just that uncertainty is like the X factor that's missing from this reported C9 roster. Um, I do think at the end of the day, though, it makes sense that this is the sort of roster
Yeah.
that C9's reportedly going for after we heard the rumblings or rumors that they might have the lowest budget in CDL history. And that is what, coming full circle with what you were saying at the end of your last spiel. That has me concerned about any potential quick trigger roster moves being made for this squad. If C9's already in a position where they seemingly don't want to spend a lot of money on the CDL this year, is this a situation where this team could struggle and they just stick with this squad and ride it out so they're not paying for another player? Like, how will that impact any potential roster moves? I don't know the answer to that, but that's certainly something in the back of my mind that's sticking out. I do think, though, that this could be a squad that surprises early in the season, sort of like Carolina last year. Like, this is a squad that people are going to have low expectations for, and if they learn the game very quickly and get in a position where they can build some nice CDL points early on, that could bode well for the squad. But end of the day, I'm along the same train of thought as you. I'm just not super thrilled with this roster, but based on everything we've heard this offseason about the reported budget and everything, it does make sense.
Yeah, taking the entire Omit roster, they deprived us of having Juju the Don be an assistant coach for C9 this year because he was an assistant for Omit this past season. So it just keeps getting worse, I guess. I I don't know if you've seen that Family Guy episode or the clip where Peter is offered the boat or he's offered a box, and
Yeah.
he's like, a boat is a boat, but a box, anything can be in the box, even a boat. And I feel like that's kind of like, the worst outcome here is like, you like, what is the upside? Like, what is the highest potential of this roster? Like 7th, 6th, and like, so you go for the comfort picks with Afro and Beans. Even though I would say that like Afro is more like uncomfortable just because he is coming from challengers as well. But like these guys that have been in the CDL, that have been established, but they haven't established themselves to be superstar players by any means. Afro at the beginning, maybe, but recently not. And like, so you pick that over Mamba and Craze, who are unknowns, like you said. Like you don't know what they're going to do in the CDO, how they're going to perform, but you know exactly how Afro and Beans are going to perform. Like, it would be stunning if this team is any higher than 6th place, like past like Major 1. Like they might have like Major 1 qualifier is always real weird. Like just the first matches, the records can look weird. I just like past Major 1, I don't see this team in this iteration of this team being higher than 6th place in the league, which I guess when you come from a season where you didn't make champs and you weren't 6th place at like really any point in the season, that kind of seems like a good thing that you're able to get up to 6th. But I would just say that C9 shouldn't be aspiring to be the Boston Breach, and that is kind of what they have become very quickly in the CDL. And in Boston, like, it makes perfect sense why they would be content, just kind of sticking around 7th, 8th place the entire season, spoiling a few tournaments for other teams, but otherwise not being incredibly competitive other than like one event. But C9, like, we talked about it so many times, basically since they've come into the CDL. Like, C9 is one of the most recognizable and popular and most successful North American esports organization. I shouldn't even say North American, just esports organizations in total, because like C9 is an international brand, and yet they're just kind of giving us nothing on the CDL front, in terms of hope and optimism that they could aspire to be championship contenders. And maybe they would never have been that with the Omit roster, but I would have at least liked to see it. I would have liked to let those guys fail together and then go from there. Then maybe you bring in Afro and Beans. Maybe you get to that point where you're like, all right, Mom and Craze aren't doing it. Let's bring in guys that have been here before, that know what they're doing. And then, you could kind of reassess at that point. But we're not there. And it looks like they won't get that chance regardless, because it looks like at least one of Mamba and Craze will be on another team potentially to begin the year, which then kind of rules out this Omit team ever really being a true foursome to start the season. So we'll see. I don't have a lot of hopes. You don't seem to have a lot of hopes for this team, but that's just that is like the C9 MO right now, is like, don't get your hopes up. They should just put that on like a t-shirt or something. But yeah, that. Anything else before we move on?
I think the Boston comparison was a really good point by you. Like that is, feels like that's like similar, at least from a roster construction point. And the one thing I will say, I've done it multiple times over the years now. I've given Boston a ton of credit, even when it felt like the organization was going to depart COD Esports.
Yeah.
I gave Boston a ton of credit in the first year when they basically entered and had to pick a roster from players that just all the 11 other teams were set, and they had to pick from, you know, essentially
Scraps.
not the top 44 players. I didn't want to say scraps, but
Yeah.
you know, not the top 44 players who were already signed to teams, and they still made it work and had a decent year. And then outside of results and rosters, they have been one of the few organizations consistently willing to host events when other organizations haven't even hosted an event or have tried and had to have it canceled or moved to, you know, a location without fans, whatever the case may be. Um, and I know it's been a short time for C9, but like obviously I don't think we've heard reports of C9 potentially hosting an event this year, and they didn't last year. So, um, you know, maybe it's not even a really fair comparison in the sense of outside of just like a pure roster construction. But when you factor in, like you said, the brand identity and you know, just all that outside factor stuff for what Cloud9 is and expectations once they entered the CDL, like it's been a bit of a disappointment so far. Um, and I will say, like you briefly mentioned, like the Major One qualifiers or whatever. Like just comparing the Vancouver team, because these are the two teams we've talked about. I could see a very realistic situation where this reported Cloud9 roster is ahead of the Vancouver roster at the end of the Major One qualifiers.
Yeah.
But by the end of the season, if both rosters stick, I would expect the Vancouver roster to be ahead of the C9 roster because as the season goes, I think that Vancouver roster just has more potential, and um, so that's kind of where I'm at right now with the C9 squad. I do think they would be kind of like my team that, like, if these four guys just grind right off the launch of the game and they put their heads down and they pick up on some stuff, especially with Vivid in the S&D, like they could surprise some people in the Major One qualifiers, but then outside of that, like I just have low expectations for this reported squad.
Yeah, I mean that's basically what Boston, like their spot anyway, is that those four guys just are super loyal to each other. They stuck together the entire season, through actually like even the off season through the entire season,
Yep.
and like that was kind of the way they were able to win a lot of their matches. Was just like, I mean, they know what they're gonna do. They like there's no kind of unknown with them. They are kind of locked in together. So like if that is C9's goal, okay, I would say that if that's your goal, I don't know why you just wouldn't go with the Omit guys because they've already been together. So like it doesn't really make any sense on any level. You know, regardless of how you look at it. Yeah, I don't know. It's very disappointing. And you know, I don't know how many C9 COD fans there are, because I mean, the COD fans typically, like most sports fans, like you get more of them the more matches you win, the more championships you win, and C9
Yep.
hasn't been remotely competitive since coming into Call of Duty, and I'm sure this is probably not how they thought they were going to start their stint in the CDL when they took over a
thought they had
roster.
Hydra.
Yeah, they're like, we have like the second best player in the league, and now they didn't make champs last year, and they signed a roster where, you know, most of this roster was not in the CDL at the end of the season anyway, even though most of them started in the CDL to begin the season. So we'll see what happens, I guess. Next, I wanted to talk about Minnesota because it kind of ties into all of this because Mamba, who we've been talking about, who was a part of that Omit roster, he is a part of the reported roster for the Minnesota ROKKR or G2 Minnesota ROKKR. I don't know what they're going to go with as we move on in the offseason and toward the season, but he is reportedly a part of that roster, and he will be joining up, reportedly according to Ronnie Intel, with Estriel, Crimp, and Skies. So I'm excited for Mamba. I think Estriel is really good. We talked about it before. I'm a fan of Crimp. The holdover for me, and it will always be that way, is Skies because he did not have a good season last year. And I'm always real skeptical when guys have bad seasons and they're on the, I wouldn't not even say the old side because that's super disrespectful as guys, as a person that is definitely older than like 95% of the current CDL players, but guys that have been around a while, and Skies has been around for the entirety of the CDL, at least. That it gives me pause that that he's coming in. Um, the previous report before this had come a month previous. It was Estriel, Crimp, Skies, and Gwyn. So obviously Gwyn seems like he's going out to Vancouver, and Mamba is coming into Minnesota. What do you think about this roster and how it kind of differs from the reported roster from last month with Gwyn in it?
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna start with. Is it seems like last year, I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, Nero and Mac. It was mostly Nero, but I think both of them were like the guys who were reported on at least two, maybe three different teams throughout RosterMania.
Yeah.
This offseason it's been Gwen because this that initial report was September 9th. For Gwyn potentially on Minnesota, and then it wasn't an actual report, but there was a Zuma clip of him on stream back when it was reported on October 2nd that Cloud9 was going to be Afro Beans Abe, and then Zoom. There was no fourth in that report from Ronnie Intel, and Zuma was the one on stream who was like, "It's Gwen, it's Gwen." He was seemingly leaking it. So Gwen has been associated with at least three. CDL teams reportedly this offseason, so I did find that interesting. But I do think, yeah, my thoughts on this reported Minnesota roster is I'm definitely excited to see what Mama can do and happy he's getting an opportunity, even if it's not with that, previous stack and all that stuff we've already talked about. Same mindset as you. I'm glad they're keeping Estriel. That was the conversation that we brought up in episodes many months ago now, is that core they had of Geo, Nero, and Estriel from last year. It felt like they were going to keep at least one of them because they all popped off at different moments throughout the season and had the potential to be guys they could build around. And I like that they kept Estriel.
Yeah.
Kremp, same outlook as you. Like he's had his moments, and even dating back to previous season where he had that really good end of the year with 100 Thieves and LAT. He's had some good moments. I remember him dropping like 15 plus in an SND. I believe it was on Karachi. I don't know why I remember that, but I know he has some good potential there, so I like him. And it's just Skies is the big question mark, and I think it's Skies has done a lot in the CDL, world champion, won multiple titles. It's just the last year, it's kind of ironically it's the Kenny situation. Just last year, Kenny's performance left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, and it's really I don't want to say it's no fault of his own, but Skies was joining a team that was on a historic losing streak, and it was just not a great situation from the outside looking in. And we hear after the fact, like Kenny talking about like PC issues, and then Skies uses that same PC and is also underperforming statistically. I'm not going to jump in that, conspiracy theory, but it is a weird coincidence if nothing else. Um, so I am happy because it would have sucked just point blank if Skies like retired or didn't get another opportunity after this last season. Um, I don't know if it's the answer for Minnesota, and I don't know how it's going to work out, but I think from an S&D perspective, Skies and Kremp and Estriel working together, I like that combo there without even knowing really much about Mamba and his S&D prowess or lack thereof, but um and they got Looney at the helm, so Looney's getting another chance to show what he's able to do as a head coach. So there's some interesting pieces here for Minnesota. This is another team. I'm definitely more excited about this Minnesota squad than the reported C9 roster, but it's a team again. I don't picture them winning a championship
No.
right away or at any point this season, but they, maybe they can, they're another squad that'll have low expectations and then prove some people wrong. Who knows?
Yeah, there's kind of like I do have a little bit of a double standard because C9 and Minnesota, like these iterations might be right around the same spot in the standings. And I'm going to be way more lenient. I'm already telling you, I'm going to be way more lenient on Minnesota than I'm going to be on
Sure.
C9 because Mamba, first time CDL player, Escher and Crimp, they've been in the CDL like 3 years now, maybe. I'm not going to be super lenient on Skies because, I mean, he's been around forever and he's had a lot of success. And we've seen him at his absolute best. So when you see any player, not just Skies, like I don't want to just single him out, but any player and they're not at their best anymore, you're always going to be like, oh, you remember like, 2022, like, the good old days. And, that's probably going to be the case here. I also think that this is just Minnesota is very, and we'll talk about Toronto in just a minute, but like these two teams to me it's really indicative that the CDL has an AR shortage, and like these guys, like Skies, it's very like if they could find someone that was like super promising at AR, they probably would bring in someone like that, but there's just not that guy, I don't think, right now. Like, at least from what I know, or that isn't already on another roster, which is the biggest issue here. And so they go with Skies, but like you said, he's the question mark, and like Mamba is too, but like he's more of like an optimistic question mark, and Skies is like, like okay, we'll see what happens here, and I don't know, like it. I just have some worries about it, but he can always prove me wrong, and maybe it was just the fit that he was like both with LAG and Optic last year, because we saw with LAG before, or with Skies and without Skies, they were just a bad team, and I don't know how much of that can be blamed on him. Same with Optic, like they were horrible before he got there. They were horrible with him, even though they did win like a few matches, but again, like it's very difficult to say like that is on him when they have like former world champions also on that roster that just weren't performing up to standard and the team wasn't. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with Minnesota. And if they're able to kind of figure things out as the season goes along. Like I said, with Toronto though, like I wanted to lump them in here just because I think that 3/4 of this roster is like absolute dynamite. Like three of the best players at their respective positions are on this team, and then our boy Insight is also on this team, and like that's no disrespect, but like he did not have a good season last year. He had a horrific champs last year, which is not what you want. Toronto, I should just say the roster, they officially announced it on October 8th, so last Wednesday. They announced that it's Joe DeCeves, Kleenex, Real, who we had talked about over the offseason, how he allegedly reneged on his deal with Miami, went to Toronto, caused a bit of a stir down in South Beach. And then they also have Insight on this team, so he's coming back. There was some skepticism about whether he would return with this team. He is, so we have that out of the way. What do you think about this foursome? Do you have the same level of, I guess, worry as I do about if Insight is able to kind of keep up with these other three?
I wouldn't word it that way. I think this just like is the move that made the most sense
Yeah.
based on everything we know about Toronto and all of the pieces available. Once the whole Real situation went down, we both like kind of speculated they wanted to. Um, how do I want to phrase it? Because it's not like we had any inside info, but we were both kind of like saying like Nasty could be a potential good fit here, make him the main AR, and see what how that works out. And I threw Sib out before there was the Sib reports of him reportedly going to Gentlemates, which that still hasn't been confirmed. But um, once like all the AR pieces started falling around that, it really felt like, we weren't hearing much, and when you're not hearing much, it felt like Insight was just going to be the obvious answer and slip right back in, which Toronto's things, we've talked about it on multiple episodes over the years now. Their thing for these off seasons is they've let their players uh, explore their options in the off season, and in the case of Insight and Kleenex, they've both announced free agency multiple times now, and multiple times they've returned in the end. So I'm not surprised that this is the position Toronto is in. The most surprising thing I will say is that they seemingly uh, confirmed this roster, and what was the wording they used? Let me pull up the tweet. They said introducing your Toronto Ultra roster for 2026 and did not mention Koi, which it seemed to be reported or rumored that there would be a Koi rebrand even, before EWC last year. Like Kleenex was saying that Champs might have been the last time he wore an Ultra jersey or whatever the case may be there. So a that was one of the most interesting elements here, is that we seemingly are going to have Toronto Ultra again, and not the Koi rebrand that was potentially rumored and all that stuff. Um, but yeah, from a roster standpoint, still think very highly of Joe. Really excited to see Joe and Rial work together, because I think very highly of Rial. Everybody who listens to this knows my thoughts on Kleenex. I do have some concerns on Kleenex in the flex role.
Mm-hmm.
If it is an AR heavy meta, if it is an SMG heavy meta, however, the three in a world where it's three SMGs and one AR, Kleenex, Joe, and Rial on the SMGs, that's like a lethal SMG trio, and I would really like to see that. So, I do think the meta will have a big impact on the success of this squad, but I think very highly of Kleenex, and I think if he works at it, he could be a suitable flex. It's just weird to think about Kleenex like holding an iron sight with an AR instead of being that super uber aggressive entry SMG player that we know him as over the last 7 whatever years. Little side note that I'll throw in here just because I listed it up top, but Breaking Point posted a graphic October 8th. Um, so that would have been after this was confirmed, but Simp and Kleenex are the only two players who have been with the same CDL organization for the entire duration of the CDL. Obviously, Atlanta FaZe has rebranded to FaZe Vegas now, but still FaZe. Um, but if you do count that, Kleenex has been on Toronto Ultra the entire time, and if they don't change the Koi, then I guess technically Kleenex has played for only one team that hasn't rebranded throughout the entire CDL. So that's a pretty neat uh, tidbit there that I saw a Breaking Point post. But yeah, um, overall for Toronto, I just think the Insight move made too much sense for it to not be um, the move that ended up happening. Am I disappointed, or did I mean, just based on the options, I don't really know what else they could have done from a main AR perspective, but um end of the day, we'll have to see how it plays out. And like I said, I do think the meta, I think you can say it for multiple teams that the meta could have an impact on them, but I do think for this Toronto squad, it's possible to argue that uh, the meta could have the biggest impact on the success or lack thereof for this squad in particular.
Yeah, I think once Toronto didn't get like Ghosty or Sib or
Yeah.
one of those players, it just became kind of an impossible task for them to find a suitable AR that could be on this team. Um, and like I guess the only other option would have been like not to get Real and have Kleenex as the second sub behind Joe, and then bring in a flex instead of moving Kleenex to flex, or something along those lines where you kind of avoid that. But I mean, they had the opportunity to get like one of the better SMG players in the league in Real, and they did that, and I think that makes a lot of sense. They're probably banking on just Kleenex being so talented that even if it isn't his natural position, that he can be very good in the flex, and Maybe they are hoping, just praying a little bit, that it is a SMG heavy meta and it doesn't really matter whether he's the flex or not, and they can have a lot of success that way. But yeah, I think really it just came down to like and same thing with Minnesota. There just aren't very many ARs just floating around in the CDL. It's always kind of been that way to an extent because ARs like, I mean, there have been AR heavy metas, but I think historically you would say that there's probably only been like on a 4-team roster, like there's like one AR player, and like sometimes you have the flex that can be the main AR, but I think most of the time that's just not the case. I think there's a lot of just main ARs, and they're usually very, very good, and they stick around a long time, and they don't come as free agents very often, which is the issue I think that a lot of these teams run into, where they just can't find someone that isn't already on another roster. Like it would, in a perfect world, it's like, all right, like we'll bring in Dashy, like let's go, and we'll like that becomes the like a world championship level roster immediately, or Celium or someone like that. But those guys, as is reported, with Vegas' salary for Cell, like like it. The price tag is quite steep if you want to get those guys on your team, and Toronto has not seemingly been that kind of team where they're just going to shell out a ton of money to get these guys. Even if this is like I'm sure a pretty nicely compensated team, all things considered. But yeah, I'm a little hesitant about how this team will perform, but if Insight is able to kind of get back to closer to what he was like before the season, then they're going to be really, really good. Like much, much better than they were this past season. And I think they finished third in the standings at the end of the season, even though they were never seemingly a contender at any point in the year, except Mercules' like one appearance. But other than that, like I'm fairly certain they finished third, and fourth,
Vancouver
excuse me.
was 405, Toronto was 400.
Yeah, so Vancouver jumped them at the last event. But yeah, like that to me, like that's good. If they're able to finish top 4 again, that puts them in a very good position going into champs, where they don't have to, probably play Vegas or Optic or LAT or whoever's like the top 4 seeds. Like they don't have to play them in the first round. Who knows what happens after that? So we'll see what happens just in general with Toronto. Other than that, we had a confirmation from the Riyadh Falcons, not the Vegas Falcons. I'm still going to get tripped up on that quite a bit. But 99 Kiz has been locked down. The Bulldog, according to the Riyadh Falcons, has arrived in Riyadh. He joins the Falcons. Formerly, they already signed Celium, which obviously that was really, really big news for that team just in general. And we talked about like just in general how much we love Kiz, and this past season seemingly to me was not indicative in the slightest about like who he is as a player and what he can be. This was just a disaster for LAG across the board. But I think with the level of teammates that he has this season, like he could be competing for championships, sooner rather than later. So it's gonna be Kiz, it's gonna be Celium, Exnid, and Pred is the Riyadh Falcons roster. Clayster is the head coach, and I believe Denz is also in the organization. So that's
GM, I believe.
So that's a really solid team. Now that it's all confirmed, kind of where do you see, we don't know the confirmations, I guess, of all of these rosters, but based on what we have in terms of reports and in the confirmations of some of these other teams, where do you kind of see Falcons slotting into to start this season?
I mean, I feel like a lot of people have them ranked very lowly already initially. Again, we don't know all the teams, but I feel like, there's questions right now around XNID. I think that's fair. I do think he showcased what he's capable of last year, despite all of the turbulence in that first season for Vegas Falcons. now he is unquestionably surrounded by very talented players and is in a position to learn a lot from these guys and take his game to the next level. So all eyes, I think, will be on him. I do think for me, it's ironic talking about the meta here again because I was just talking about it impacting Toronto potentially the most. Um, but to a bigger degree, like we at least know that it seems like Kleenex is going to be the flex for Toronto. Really, right now, I think the guess or people are assuming that Kismet's going to be the flex. There were talks for Falcons of potentially having Exnid be a flex, and I don't know if it was ever actually discussed, but like Pred could potentially be a flex. Like he's been a slower SMG player in the past, and could potentially transition to that role if he decides to. I think that would be like the third best option just in terms of what I would think of after seeing all these guys play and whatnot. Um, but I do think that's interesting just to think about is it's not totally clear exactly what the role situation is going to be like for this new Falcon squad. I think I said it when the reports first came out for this squad, and I once it was first reported of Kismet, I got really excited of thinking of Kismet and Pred working together because it brings me back to thinking about Kismet running in front of Hydra, and um you know Pred is pretty similar playstyle wise to Hydra in my mind at least, and it would be kind of weird in my head to think of Kismet instead of being that guy like running in front of Pred being flex and potentially just holding down holding his irons down with an AR or something like that. So I don't know how that's going to work out. But those are the two biggest elements that I think um, will be looked at in terms of the success of the squad. Also, just in terms of how Celium plays with a new set of teammates for the first time and how Celium and Pred work together, because they are both two players who habitually are at the top of KD leaderboards and just kill stats for the CDL. So, will their play styles mesh together? Is another question you could ask of the squad. The talents there, especially with Kismet in tow. Um, I don't know how it's going to work out, and I feel like that's the thought in the community right now is a little lower on the squad than potentially it should be. So I don't know. It will be interesting to see how it works out. I am excited. Like just thinking of Celium and Pred on the map, like potentially both dropping 40 together, and then Kismet could have a game where he's like 10 and 20, but he just sits in the hill for 3 minutes, and Falcons win 250 to 150, something like that. So, um, yeah, I don't know how it's gonna work out, but I do think I am probably a little higher on this squad than what I've seen other reactions in the community. I feel like a lot of people have just written this squad off without even seeing them work, and I think there is some ways you could justify it, but I mean, you got three world champions on it in Pred, Celium, and Kismet. So I think it is a little premature for anybody who's just like, nah, this team sucks and they're wasting money, yada yada. Like I'm definitely not in that camp, but we'll have to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I'm not in that camp either. I don't believe in Exnid. I don't think like he's um, nearly up to the level of these other three, but it might not matter all that much, just because the other three are ridiculously good, and if they're able to gel, like they're going to be a really tough team. Like regardless of how Kisnet or not, yeah, Kismet, but Exnid does, I think like if those other three are able to kind of work together and get it down, man, they're gonna be really really tough, and they just have so much more talent than just some of these other teams. Like even if it's not, um, you know, like even if they haven't really played with each other or anything like that, I just think with how good, Pred, I we didn't really get to see it last year, because he was gone for part of the season. They came back and was on Optic, and that was just kind of a mess. And the Vegas roster, just in general, at the end of the year last season was a mess. But we've already know what Celium is. Kismet, I think that was more. Maybe I'm being optimistic. Maybe we're both being optimistic about it, and it really was kind of a sign of like some kind of fall off or whatever with LAG last year. But I'm gonna at least give it another year before I get to that conclusion. So I still think that he's really, really good. And so like those three together, that's a really tough roster. Even if I don't believe in the fourth at all, but I guess we'll end up and see what happens with Vegas. Real quick, the rumored schedule for the CDL this season, according to Breaking Point, they put up a little graphic almost 2 weeks ago now, but the current 2026 CDL land schedule: Major 1 Toronto, Major 2 Birmingham, Major 3 Unknown, Major 4 Paris, Champs in Las Vegas, and then EWC in Riyadh. So that would mean that only one of the 6 events that the CDL is reportedly going to have this coming year would be in America. That would be pretty interesting. I don't know the last time, if that has ever happened, where like that many international events have like been on the calendar. Even like pre-CDL, like we'd still have a ton of like US based events. So I would imagine that Major 3 regardless will be a US based event, but there's the possibility that could be Madrid, because like they hosted a tournament there last year, or Barcelona, because I think they were originally going to go to Barcelona and then it got moved to Madrid. Either way, like I think Spain is probably a pretty likely option, maybe not the likeliest. Other than that, probably Texas would seem pretty likely. Miami would potentially happen. I mean, it just seems ridiculous that we've gone so long without Los Angeles majors, considering it's like the second biggest city in the country. But I don't see that happening. So it's probably down to like Texas, Miami, maybe Chicago. But what do you think of this proposed schedule, or this reported schedule?
Yeah, if those other events are like as close to locked in as, to a point where they're being reported, I feel like Major 3 absolutely has to be a US event, because I just don't see any world where the only US event for an entire year is Champs in Vegas. CDL surprised you and I multiple times on multiple different occasions and subjects. But I would be extremely surprised if Champs was the only US based. It would be like a complete departure from like, going all these years of not having a European event to basically going in the complete opposite direction of having tons of European events and no US events, which not fair to say European, because there's Toronto on there, so that's an NA event, quote unquote. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to put too much stock into I feel like EWC in Saudi Arabia seems like a lock, and is a lock, I'm pretty sure. The Champs in Vegas, that was like reported alongside the Phase rebrand, so I feel like that's like maybe not a lock. And they, regularly the CDL doesn't like to announce Champs very early. They usually save that a little later in the season. Last year was weird though, because last year they saved either Major 3 or Major 4, but they did Champs right in the initial. It was whatever event was DreamHack. I can't remember if that was 3 or 4 now. But they like saved announcing that one, but they announced Champs in Canada last year, like early on with the initial announcement. So maybe they're switching things up there, but I'm not gonna go too crazy on this. If this is what happens, it is what it is. But I will say I would just be very surprised if there's only one U.S. event in 2026.
I would also be surprised. I wouldn't hate it, just because, well, one, I don't go to these events, so but just from a perspective of like, it'd be cool if it was Madrid or Barcelona, because then you hit Heretics gets their home base, then Paris, Gentlemates gets their home base, Birmingham, I don't know, like half the league gets their home base, I don't know. Toronto, obviously the Ultra, Riyadh at the end of the year. Falcons gets it. FaZe will get Vegas, even though technically they'll get Vegas. Optic really gets Vegas, and Major 3, like it'd be nice to have a US based one, but I think if it was something like all these international events and then Vegas at the end of the season, I think that could build up a lot of anticipation for the Americans that are like, all right, like, I could go to the Optic major, I could go to the Miami major, I could go to the North Carolina major, blah, blah, blah. But like when you only have one opportunity or you spend money to, Toronto's obviously the cheapest one, but like, you probably have to go across the pond to get to any of these other events. It's a lot more money. Be like, I'm just going to save up my money and I'm going to go to Vegas. I'm going to lose all my money while I'm in Vegas. I'm going to watch the Boston Breach win champs and then I'm going to go home. That's probably how I would do it. But it doesn't, like you said, it's a complete departure from what the CDL has proven itself to be, which is entirely American focused in Toronto. And that's about it. I just don't see them not doing an American event until probably June would be champs. So yeah, I don't see it happening. I don't know though. I don't think anything has been confirmed except Riyadh is for sure happening. Like that's and Birmingham, just the fact that it's tied in with DreamHack, like I would be very, very shocked if that isn't, even though it hasn't been confirmed, that's probably locked in place anyway, just because the CDL is probably like, we don't have to pay the whole thing to put on this event. We can just make it like a part of this bigger DreamHack event. I think that's probably what they end up doing. In Toronto, I'm sure that's the case because Toronto has been the most consistent team in terms of hosting events, and God bless them for it, because that is what we really need in the CDL is teams that are just, we don't care if we lose money. We're just going to keep hosting events regardless. I think we have saved the biggest news for last. He has